So I recently started doing a video series on a book that I've been reading called How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Now, this is a book that I had read a few years ago, and like most books that we've probably read, we read it once, gets put on a bookshelf, we forget about it, life goes on. Well, I had recently stumbled across it again and started reading it, and as I was reading it, I forgot how much I enjoyed the book and how good it was. In fact, I can't recommend it enough, but it inspired me to want to do a video series because there's so many excellent lessons and applications that we can use to our everyday life that I wanted to share it with people. So the theme of chapter 2 is the big secret of dealing with people. Now, this is something that I'm sure we've tried to figure out throughout our lives in understanding how do you deal with people. And it's usually a challenge to figure that out. You know, in fact, the people that do it best, I'm sure you see them all around you. They're either very successful, or they might be retired, or might have big mansions or have a lot of money. But it's not always about that. They might also be successful in the amount of happiness that they have, or the deep enriching relationships they have. And that's really the important part. This isn't about building money. This isn't about getting status. This is about being able to be successful in your own life in a way that's going to be fulfilling and enriching to you. And this chapter really drives home to that. So I want you to start by thinking about, who is it somebody that you truly respect? Think about the characteristics of that individual. What about them makes you respect them as much as you do? I'm sure there's something, and I'm sure that every one of you that are watching this have at least one or two individuals that somebody instantly came to mind, somebody that you just have that immense amount of respect for. But think about the characteristics that that individual possesses, and what about them makes you respect them on the level that you do. My guess is if they asked you to do something, without thinking twice about it, you would probably do almost anything they asked. It could be something as simple as a small favor, but it could be a huge favor, something that might have been way outside your realm of expertise or beyond your area of responsibility, or just something that, quite frankly, you knew nothing about. But because of the level of respect that you had for this individual, you probably did your darndest to figure it out and give it your best effort, simply because you didn't want to let that person down. And when that happened, how did you feel about it afterwards? Here's the next question. Have you ever actually stopped and given pause to that? Not only how you felt about it afterwards, but why you did it to begin with. Why were you so willing to do something for this person that asked you to do it simply because they asked you? You know, a lot of times when we're asked to do that, let me rephrase that. Not a lot of time. 100% of the time, when we're doing something, whether it's subconsciously or consciously, we have the notion of what's in it for me. Humans inherently are selfish beings, and this is something that it's hardwired within us. It's not our fault. The difference is, you know, how do we understand that? How do we control that? And then how do we make sure that we're not allowing that to take control of our lives? So, you know, when you're asking the question of what's in it for me, you know, sometimes it might be money, sometimes it might be a promotion, sometimes it might be status, or getting a favor in return. But it's not always that either. Just like I said earlier, it's not always about the status or the money, but it's about the feelings and the enrichment of your life that goes along with it. So if you're doing something, you know, the what's in it for me might be a subconscious, well, I'm doing it because it makes me feel good about myself. You know, and there's nothing wrong with that. But think about, what are those triggers for you? American philosopher William James has a quote that says, the deepest principle in human nature is the craving. I'm going to repeat that. The craving to be appreciated. Now that's big. You know, what he's saying essentially is that we have this unbelievable desire to feel important, or to be important, or to be recognized as somebody who is important, or for somebody to point out the fact that we are important. But it's a craving. We crave it so much, almost like an addiction, that it's what drives our behavior day in and day out. So, you know, as you're interacting with people, something you should think about is every person you interact with. It could be a child, it could be a colleague, it could be a boss, it could be someone at your church, it could be just someone out in public. But imagine that every single person that you interact with has this big sign dangling from their neck that says, make me feel important. So think about that. You know, it's one of those things I was actually talking to my wife, Carrie, about recently, because I was talking about the book with her. And, you know, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the concept of perceptual awareness, but think about if you've ever bought a new car where all of a sudden you just magically notice all of that same make and model car everywhere on the road. It's because it's something that's clear in your mind. But if you start thinking about this, you'll notice it day in and day out. So think about the things that make you feel important. And I'm sure you can think of some stuff right away, but then start to notice what about other individuals makes them feel important. Some good examples, and again, you may never have even thought of this, but when you go into a professional establishment or a doctor's office, think about some of the things, or you've walked into somebody's office, think about the things that they have posted on the wall, or the things that are on their desk or around the room. Something I'll point out, I'd be willing to bet in some form or fashion, you've noticed that somebody behind their desk had this big plaque displayed very prominently so anybody who walks in can see it. And I'm not talking about tucked off into a corner. I'm talking about this big, massive frame sitting directly behind their chair that has a diploma or multiple diplomas, and especially if it's something from a very highly accredited institution, because that makes them feel important. It makes them feel significant about their accomplishments they had. Now, in some places, that's more relevant than others. I would hope that if I walked into a doctor's office, that individual who's going to be seeing me as their patient has a PhD in whatever practice it is that they have. And you know what? It gives me peace of mind when I see that display, because then I know that it's legit. Although a lot of times we might just walk in and trust blindly that they have a PhD. But the fact of the matter is this. Those people put that there because it makes them feel significant and important. So what are some of the different things about an individual that will make that person feel important? It's not always a degree. A small example that I like to share actually happened recently. A few weeks ago, I went ice fishing with my children. It's the first time in 10 years that I've gone ice fishing. I've never really been a big ice fisherman. In fact, I don't own any ice fishing equipment, so I had to call my brother-in-law, who's an avid outdoorsman, and say, hey, man, my boys have been bugging me about going ice fishing. I think it'd be a lot of fun. Would you mind if we tagged along with you one of these weekends to go? Yeah, absolutely, come on out. So we did. And I packed up my three boys. They're 4, 8, and 11 years old, and we got out onto the ice. And the picture that you see on the screen right now shows what happened when my 4-year-old got a fish in his hand. So if you're looking at the picture, you'll notice that it's not a very big fish that's in his hand. In fact, it's not even a fish that we caught. It was one of the bait fish called a shiner that was in a bucket that was sitting in the sled. And what was really interesting to me, it took a minute to notice it, but we hadn't even been on the ice for probably 5 or 10 minutes, and we're in the process of trying to set things up. And my son, my 4-year-old son, is holding this fish in his hand, and he keeps coming up to me. He's, Daddy, look, Daddy, look. And I finally looked at him, and I realized he wanted me to see and acknowledge the fact that he had caught a fish. Now, we didn't pull the fish out of the ice, but that didn't matter to him. He caught a fish, and he wanted to make sure that I saw it so I could let him know that I was proud of him. And so he wouldn't stop. He literally wouldn't stop until I looked at him and said, you caught a fish? He goes, yeah, Daddy, I caught a fish. I said, good job, buddy. I'm so excited for you. He goes, yeah. And then he put the fish back in the bucket. And you can guess he probably did that another 150 times throughout the time that we were out ice fishing. And, by the end of it, my voice was getting sore of the amount of times that I had to acknowledge that he had caught a fish. But he had that craving to feel important for me to acknowledge him, and the accomplishment that he had in his mind was incredibly significant. So the fact of the matter is this. When you're thinking about the people that you interact with on a day-to-day basis, and you want to build those lasting relationships, those lasting friendships, or really have them be enriched. And I'm not talking about flattery, okay? This has nothing to do with flattery, because when you give an empty compliment, I can tell you, people are going to see right through it. I can't stress enough, this has to be sincere. You have to mean when you're making somebody feel important. You can't just do it out of a false sense of, if I give this person a compliment, they're going to like me. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is pay close attention to those triggers about that individual and take a genuine interest in it. I repeat that, a genuine interest. And that's going to make the difference of whether or not somebody respects you or not when you're giving them appreciation. So if I ask the question again that I asked in the beginning, to think about that person that you truly respect. Who is it and why? How many times has your name been the one that popped up in somebody's mind? And if it's a small number, even if it's 1, that's awesome. It's amazing that you accomplished that. But if that's something that you want to grow, or if the answer is 0, think about what it is that you can do to change that. And ultimately, that has to come from you. Find out what it is about that individual that makes them tick, and do it, showing sincere appreciation and making them feel genuinely important.